Well, what a session we have now. My name is Nick Sardi. I'm not the Nick you're here to see today. And I'm a sports and entertainment lawyer based in New York, here to introduce a star-studded panel that I'm lucky to work with and that we're lucky to have here today. Global talent of the caliber of Nick Kyrgios, as well as Dave Warner and Tilly Kearns, who will be with us tomorrow, is a testament to the growth of South by Southwest Sydney as a truly global event, and a credit to its organisers, UTS, and its other sponsors who've worked so hard on building this event and its sports track. And an enormous thanks must go to you, individually, as supporters of South by Southwest Sydney. We would not be here without you, and we thank you for your vibrancy and your energy here today. And talking about vibrancy and energy, let's get to today's panel. It features an infinitely more talented and better looking Nick Kyrgios. It doesn't get bigger in tennis or in sport, and thanks to Nick for being with us today. Nick will be joined by Ryan Levy, the co-founder of Fuse Technology, a fast-growing consumer and ad tech startup valued at over $100 million and operating in several countries, including the US and our very own Australia. Ryan and Nick are going to start with a fireside chat about Nick's journey through sport and business. That will be followed by a panel with one of Australia's most successful influencers and owner of Capri the label, Madison Edwards, as well as one of Australia's most prominent sports managers, Daniel Horsfall. This exciting group will share their experiences in business, sport, and life, as well as the lessons they've learned along the way. So buckle up. We're about to be treated to an excellent panel. Let's give a warm welcome to Ryan and Nick.
How you going?
I'm good. How's everyone going?
Excited to be here. Thank you guys for taking the time. Nick, you're not a stranger to the big stage. You've been there once or twice, to say the least. This is a pretty big stage, one of the biggest that South by has to offer. I compared my preparation in coming in today, and I was like, I wonder what Kyrgios does as he goes into center stage at Wimbledon or a big match at the US Open. I'm curious, and I think it would be exciting for people to hear kind of, your perspective. What do you do to prepare, manage your emotions, and kind of get ready for the big stage?
It's a tough question because as I was younger, I was definitely more on edge and anxious like you were 5 minutes ago. As I'm 29, 30 now, and I've walked out to some amazing stages in my life. Obviously grew up in Canberra, Australia, with my parents, and to make it all the way to the Wimbledon final, I'm walking past the royal family and all these amazing things, and I'm like, is this really, I kind of have that imposter syndrome every time I walk into a room like this and have the chance to speak in front of people like you, and hopefully I can help in some way. But look, at the end of the day, I know that it's all a bonus for me. Everything that I've ever done has started from tennis. So what I prepare now, I have my beautiful girlfriend usually follows me around the world. I have a great team of people around me. I think that's all that really matters. No doubt I was anxious walking onto some of these courts and all that, but as long as you've got that good support crew around you, that's all that matters.
I couldn't agree more. As they say, it's a privilege to be under pressure. And what's really unique that you said, and I was having this conversation with Shayna Jack yesterday, who just won 2 gold medals representing Australia in the Paris Olympics, was that no matter what I do, I often find myself having this imposter syndrome. And we didn't prep that, you just brought it up. Can you explain what that feels like to people? And do you still get that way because, you, from my homework, sell the 3rd most tickets in the world in tennis. You're maybe the face or one of the faces of the sport. You have this aura about you that's bigger than tennis now and has become that over the last few years. I'm curious, do you still find yourself ever getting this imposter syndrome? What am I doing talking to this person? Why am I in this room? You know, I don't deserve to be here type of mentality?
Definitely. You know, I have my talk show now. I've spoken to people like Mike Tyson, Jay Shetty, Gordon Ramsay, and I'm like, why are these people answering the questions that Nick Kyrgios is kind of, you know, giving to them? But I guess I do underestimate, you know, my journey. You know, I've a kid from Canberra making it all the way to the global stage, playing in front of, you know, millions and millions of people, meeting all these amazing people with all these crazy experiences. And yeah, I do find myself, you know, why me? But, you know, I've worked incredibly hard. You know, all I've done since I was 7 years old was play tennis, get on the practice court, and hours. And now, obviously, knowing that my tennis journey is, you know, slightly coming to an end. It's definitely at the later stages of my career. There's so much more. You know, I have my own foundation. I try and work with kids as much as I can. You know, doing things like this, just trying to, you know, guide or help people with my experiences on their journey. And I think it's all one form of communication for me was tennis. That wasn't my, you know, I don't meet people and say, oh, I'm a tennis player. You know, I'm a human first, but that was my main, I guess, form of communication. And now doing things like this, you know, I think it's all part of it.
Well, I'm excited to unpack a bit about your journey on a personal level during this fireside that we have. I'm equally excited to be joined by your manager, Horse, and by Maddie, and talk about, you know, kind of the off-court business perspective that you guys are now leaning into.
Yep.
And what that transition has been. Transition's maybe not the right word because you're still very much in it, and we'll get to that in a bit. Stay tuned for an exciting announcement at the end of today's panel. Something that you've been very vocal about, and it's unique because another perspective you'll bring to people today is kind of the lens behind the curtain, that oftentimes people, when they see athletes or celebrities who are best in class in their industries, regardless of what they do, tastemakers, if you will, it's rare for people to have this human element connection to that celebrity or that athlete. And I think you do a really unique job, and I think this is just who you are, I don't think you try to do it, of building a personality that people can relate to, because at the end of the day, like you said, we are all human, and everybody goes through things. It doesn't matter how well it may seem like one may have it, you still have your own trials and tribulations. Tennis is known to be, or can be, a very lonely sport. It can have a very strong mental toll on athletes. You've been candid about your struggles in the past related to tennis and just how it affects your mental health, or how it has in the past. Can you, and I think everyone will be able to resonate with this for different reasons, but can you share with us a little bit how you maintain a balance between your mental health and the demands of being a global athlete, a global brand?
Yeah, well, that's a big question. Yeah, I mean, look, it wasn't easy for me. I was thrown to the spotlight at 17 years old, and I wasn't ready for it. It really took a toll on me. I think and everyone's younger, you know, you go on social media these days, you see everyone kind of negative comments here or there, and at 17, 18, I took it so personally and actually, you know, weighed on me a lot. I really cared about what people thought about me, and you know, how I was going about my tennis, or how I dressed, or how I looked, and it really bothered me when I was younger. And in the start of my journey, it was tough. Now I don't really care at all. I actually really enjoy when people are talking about me, and I just know that I'm doing the best I can. I'm authentic, and I think that's the biggest message throughout my career. Trying to make other people like you or care about you and all that type of stuff, it gets you nowhere. Like, as soon as I was comfortable in my own skin and really authentic, that's when really successful things happen in my life. I met amazing people, you know, like yourself. I've had all these business opportunities. So just being true to myself and looking myself at the end of the day in the mirror and saying, you know, I've done it my way, and I've done it to, you know, my standard, the way I wanted to do it. But how I balance my life mentally is hard. You know, in 2019, was dealing with, you know, self-harm, you know, had suicidal thoughts. I was very open about that. And I was playing centre court at Wimbledon, and I had self-harm all over my right arm, had to wear an arm sleeve, and people thought, just because I was on that stage, they thought I was doing amazing. You know, I was earning great money, traveling the world, and I was probably the worst I'd ever been mentally. So just because I was so insecure about what this person thought, and it was difficult.
I think that's a Great point, and thank you for sharing that. I think what's so unique about you specifically is whereas 7 or 8 years ago, maybe you were considered to be the villain of tennis, I think...
They're laughing, so
Yeah,
they still agree, clearly.
I think people grew to love you because you're so authentic, and now there's a reason why you're pulling the same media weight as Alcaraz and Djokovic in the world of tennis, even though you haven't been on the court for over a year now with an injury. And I think it's because people are as attracted to seeing you play, and you have an electrifying style to your game. Obviously, everybody knows that. But you have this fundamental truth to remaining true to who you are, and you probably evolved into that. I don't, from the sounds of it, you weren't like that at the beginning of your career. One day you were a nobody, and the next day you were all over Australian press and global media because you were thrown into the spotlight. I can't imagine how, the roller coaster of emotions that would have on you. One day you feel like it's amazing, and the next day you feel small because people are critiquing you, and you're like, who are these people who are watching me, and why do they have an opinion on me? But you've done a great job at going from the villain archetype to, the villain that everybody loves and is rooting for, kind of like that underdog personality, right? And I think it's been beautiful to see from even before we met, the way that you've evolved within the sport, and through staying true to who you are, you've become one of the biggest, sports personalities in the world, and, kudos to you for that. I think it's, not everybody gets there, right? So that's really exciting to see. Speaking of being in the spotlight, the media loves you. Regardless of what you do, the media loves you, especially if you maybe do something a little borderline controversial. Sometimes they may not have anything better to talk about. You're one of the most entertaining players in tennis. How much of the criticism that you receive from the media, or have in the past, I should say, is a byproduct of you poking fun and knowing you're going to get a rise? And how much of it would you say is just you being you, and being like, why is the media writing about this? This is ridiculous.
Well, I think sport and entertainment are one. The reason why people watch sport now, it's because, you watch NRL, or AFL, all of the Australian sports. We watch it because we don't know. There's question marks on the outcome, the personalities. So, business, entertainment, and sport for me is all the same thing. And that's why I know now if I go to Twitter right now and I type in something really controversial, it's going to be all over the front page and all over the TVs tomorrow.
Just wait till we're done today.
It's very dangerous having that power at times, because if I have a beer or two and I get social media out, who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I understand that, and my agent and my manager's just behind, so he's always telling me, let's think before we do. But I sometimes don't hear that. But look, I just have fun, and if, with everything going on in the world at the moment, I think it's important to speak on, what you think and your opinions, and, I won't stop doing that. I've made it very clear, and as you said, I think at the start of my career, people didn't quite understand, why is he so stubborn in his ways? But, if you stick to your guns, and over time, it actually earns people's respect, and it's like, okay, he's just being himself.
In a world where everything is, can be perceived as fake, you being real, you or you plural, whoever it may be, is very attractive, because people feel like they're getting an authentic perspective of who it is that they're perceiving. And that's why I think so many people have gravitated towards you over the last 4 to 5 years, is because people realized that you're true and you don't care about what they think. You're not a people pleaser in that sense. You mentioned Dan and your support behind you. You mentioned Costine, your girlfriend. And overall, you've always been very loud about the importance of friends and family to keep you grounded. How do they help you now at this stage in your career, where you know who you are in your industry? How do you lean on them for support through the highs and lows? And what do lows look like for you when, from the outside looking in, it seems like you're on top of the world, right? You're not even 30 yet. You've carved out a legacy for yourself, both on and off the court. You've done very well, financially, and credit to you and your team for that. But how has the evolution of your family and your friends and your support system changed from early days, where obvious reasons of how they were there for you were to get you through all the things that came with media scrutiny and being thrown into the limelight, to now being a global brand and a global personality in sport. How are they there for you? How do you lean on them?
I think no matter what we do, I think whether it's tennis or whatever anyone in this room does, I think it's important you have to have like an escape, like not so much an escape, but whenever I go out on center court or I'm doing this, I'm doing that, like the fact that I know that I have a quiet place, like a home, a safe place where they don't love me because I'm achieving all these things. I hope. No, but like whenever I'm achieving things, just know that your family, your partner, your friends, they don't care about, what goes on in your day, really. They just want to, have a slice of you, and you got to have that, because it's going to be a whirlwind. Like, my life sometimes just doesn't stop. You go to Wimbledon final, you're meeting all these people, you're doing businesses, I'm meeting you for another meeting, or I've got a call. It's like, I want to always make sure I've got that safety net of my family there. And I pushed them away earlier in my career because I thought I could do everything on my own. And it's just not possible with everyone in this room that's going to have success in their life, and I'm sure you guys have had it already. You know that you have to have the ability to fall back on people that just love you for you and want to spend time with you. So it doesn't always seem so hectic all the time.
Well, I do have to say, I have experienced firsthand your ability to show up for people around you, despite everything you have going on professionally. There have been times where Nick has called me before and I've been stressed out at the office, and he's like, "Are you good? I can tell you sound stressed. Talk to me. What's wrong, man?" And I'm like, "Oh man, this guy cares about me. He's got so many things going on, balancing so many different opportunities, but he can tell that just on a personal level, maybe I'm stressed, or maybe I'm, feeling overwhelmed with work, or whatever it may be." And I think that's just, again, a trait of your authenticity and your ability to, bring out the human element in yourself that transcends this sort of aura of being Nick Kyrgios, right? And so the last question I have for you before we bring out two really great, exciting additions to the panel is another thing that really impresses me about you, and I'm not here to glaze you, but is your focus on philanthropy. And I've also experienced this firsthand. Something I admire about you is your commitment to charity work. There's never enough time in the day, or too little time in the day, to be there for people in need. And you do it in various different ways. True story, about 7-8 months ago, I was in Australia. Nick was training. He invited me for a session.
You tell this to everyone.
Big mistake for accepting the invitation. I lasted maybe 19 or 20 minutes in Nick's high-intensity workout. He kept going as if it was a walk through the park for another 45 minutes. At the hour mark, I was just getting back on my feet and thought I was going to pass out for 40 minutes while you were still working out. And you quickly showered, you did a stretch, and then you said, "All right, I'm off." And I was like, "Where are you going? Don't you just want to sit down and have some water?" And you said, I'm meeting with a kid, from Make-A-Wish Foundation, and he needs me more than I need my rest right now, so I'm gonna go be with him. It makes him happy. I've met with him before, and that it's unbelievable to see, the way that just you being you and you showing up for people makes a positive impact on them.
That's the most powerful thing in my career, I think, is what I'm able to do I never understood this earlier in my life. I was like, it's all about me, and obviously at a 19, brash, confident kid, you don't realize how powerful, getting to a stage is, and then millions of kids looking up to you. And it's been the coolest thing about my career is helping out. Like, there's been 3 Make-A-Wish kids, their last dying wish literally is like, "Oh, I just want to meet Nick Kyrgios." And it's one of the most powerful things. I'm still in contact with one of them today. His name's Brooklyn, and he's actually one of my close mates, and he doesn't realize every time I'm talking to him, he's helping me more than I'm helping him, because it's like there's reward to what I'm doing. I'm able to, hopefully get more life out of him. And I do pride myself in my commitment to be helping now with my platform. And I think every sports player or every athlete or everyone with a platform is obligated to help out when they can. And I enjoy doing it. I mean, you are a bit unfit. I wouldn't say it was the hardest session I've ever done. He's painting it out like it was like the hardest session ever. It was like a light little session. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Challenge anyone in here to take him up on that workout.
I'm going to train after this if there's anyone that wants to come. So, and you can see for yourself. But yeah, I do pride myself on the charity work in my foundation and everything, because I feel like that's why we're all here. We're all here to help each other in that way. And yeah, I do pride myself on that.
Well, on behalf of everyone who doesn't have the aura that you do in terms of making that impact, we appreciate it. We thank you. It doesn't go unnoticed. I hope everybody so far is enjoying themselves. I hope that this is bringing you a unique perspective to such a big personality and kind of what goes on behind the curtain with Nick. I'm really excited to welcome Maddie and Dan Horse onto the stage. Have some really exciting, questions for them, and they bring a unique perspective, not just in terms of your relationship with Dan and how you guys manage the on and off court relationship, with Maddie on building a global brand, both personally, but also on behalf of her brand Capri. So if we can welcome Maddie and Horace on stage, that'd be great. They're just walking over from Bondi. Hey guys.
Sorry we're late.
I'm talking.
Maddie, you look beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm not a
to be
creep.
here.
Maddie's my girlfriend of 4 years.
I was about to say,
I'm
probably
glad,
should
I'm
clear
glad
that
that
up.
you said that at the beginning, because
I felt, I didn't want this to be about our relationship, and it won't be, but I felt like
we'll try not to make
I
it
have to be
bad.
honest with the crowd. So, Horace, appreciate you and your effort in bringing this all together on behalf of you and Nick, and thank you the whole South by team for hosting us, and again, for everybody here today. Let's get right into it. Maddie, for those who don't know, you started your career in modeling. You kind of fell into it early on when you were 18 years old. That sort of launched you into the world of social media when it wasn't really a thing. And you very quickly became one of the original influencers and now one of the biggest in Australia. Starting as a model, successfully transitioning into being an entrepreneur with Capri the label. What in your career, when you were doing well just being a model and an influencer, would you say inspired you to make that shift? And how have you found the transition from modeling to now doing that while also running your own business?
Well, I started modeling about a year after school, and after a couple of years of working as a model, I was working with so many amazing, talented, creative entrepreneurs, and I could just see how passionate and motivated they were having their own brand, and I just knew that I wanted to have that for myself one day, and I knew I wanted to be in fashion because fashion is my world, it's my life, I'm around it every day. So it wasn't until 2019 where I moved to Los Angeles for my modeling career, and I got about 5 months of normality before COVID hit, which was really fun. And then COVID kind of just, I don't want to say forced, but it was just like the perfect opportunity for me to stop and really think about the brand that I wanted to build, and I did exactly that, and it took about a year and a half from start to launch. And that's how Capri was born. And as for the transition, there hasn't really been a transition for me as such, because I still model, I still very much do both, and I juggle both, and I love it. The only thing that I struggled with having Capri at the beginning, and this was like a year and a half to having Capri, was actually managing my own socials, because I was doing everything for Capri at the very beginning. I was doing, the EDMs, the banners, all the content creation, content shooting, website, literally everything. So at the end of the day, I couldn't fathom putting that much effort into my own socials. So for about a year, I took a little bit of a step back from my own socials because Capri really needed my 100% energy and attention, and it needed to be nurtured. So I don't regret that at all because it needed it. But yeah, there hasn't really been a transition as such.
Well, you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
And I'm excited to see you continue to grow this passionate business of yours that I think is incredible. Horace, you continue to impress me every time I'm on a call with you, every time that we're in a meeting together. I understand why someone of Nick's stature has you in his corner as his business partner, and probably closest person to him other than, of course, his family in Costine. You've been obviously and are very well known for being involved in a lot of business ventures with Nick, both on and off the court. Can you share with us a little bit more about just yourself and what you're passionate about outside of maybe sport? And then how do you balance your sort of managerial duties, if you will, with your personal interests?
Thanks for the intro, mate. That's a tough one because there's not, like you use the word balance. I don't know if there is a word. Like balance doesn't really exist in what we do. You kind of just have to, I guess, learn to live with the chaos a little bit. With tennis, like traveling all year round it's a brutal thing. I'm sure that Nick has mentioned it a few times out here, but the whole business side of the thing, like to be fair with you, I got dropped into this. It wasn't something that I thought I was going to do. It wasn't really on the radar. It was like a pipe dream at the time. Like I actually used to sell real estate back before I was working with Nick. You know, it's a story for another time on how we got started, but basically when I started, like I had no idea. And I was just, if I didn't know something, instead of pretending like I knew, I would go and ask other people. And I think I gained a lot of respect in the industry because I was very open and just saying, hey, look, I'm really not sure how to do this, but this is what I need. Can you teach me? So within the first year of getting on tour with Nick, that's really how I learned how to become a sports manager. And it's kind of just gone from there, to be fair.
I do have to say that's a very redeemable quality about yourself, is your ability to, and maybe this is why you guys get along so well, to be transparent and authentic, just like Nick. You know, I'm guilty of it, especially earlier on in my career. I didn't like to admit when I didn't know anything because I thought it would resemble me as weak or, you know, maybe not sophisticated. And I realized that through asking questions and being curious, you actually show that you probably have a higher level of EQ than those people who don't, and an emotional aptitude that brings you forward, and you end up such a net positive because people like transparency and authenticity and love when someone asks them for an ability to help, right? And I've also experienced that with you too. You have no problem asking, hey, can you clarify what that means? Or I actually don't know what that means. And you actually end up coming across incredibly more curious and smart and intelligent than as if somebody who just says, yeah, for sure, to everything that somebody's saying. And in your mind, you're thinking, this guy has no idea what I'm talking about. You don't have to go through all of them because I know there are many. What are some of the things that earlier on when you and Nick started working together, you have now grown into implementing as a way of perspective in how you guys assess opportunities off the court, of course? I mean, obviously tennis is very much at the center of what you both do, touring, getting healthy, playing, training, etc. But you're so responsible for so much of off the court for Nick. Earlier on, I'm sure, like you admitted, you didn't really know how to navigate that. You learn as you go. What are some of the things that you learned early on, the hard way or the easy way, that now are like the first things you look for when assessing off-court business opportunities?
You know, I think the really important thing that, I figured out very early was that you just had to stay true to yourself. And I think that was the biggest thing for understanding like Nick and Nick's brand, is that like he was a certain way, he did things a certain way, and he dressed a certain way. And you weren't going to change him. No matter how hard you tried, like, oh man, you got to look like this, or do that, it just wasn't happening. So I think the sooner that everyone kind of like accepted who Nick was as a brand, it was kind of like everyone now saw these new opportunities that were like, oh wow, like we could actually use this for our brand. And I think when I look at things and when I'm assessing things, it's like, one, what is the brand? Does it resonate with Nick? And like, does it fit within Nick's brand? And those are like the main three things. And then it goes further from that. So when those three things are checked, it's like, okay, who's behind the brand? Do those people resonate with Nick? What are their goals? Like, do their visions align? Like, where are they going to take this thing? And I'm not sure if any of you know, but we are business partners with Ryan as well. And I got introduced to Ryan through a mutual friend when we were in LA shooting Nick's talk show. And at first I was like skeptic. I was like, I don't know, like, what's this tech company charge fees, right? But I went and met with him and I was like, oh, okay, like this guy's cool. And then he started showing me the brand. I was like, oh, okay, like this brand is really cool. And he started telling me some bits and pieces about like how he got here, like what he's doing, and like I guess the thing that he's trying to bridge. And then the thing that really tied me over, and this is when I took it to Nick and said, hey, I think we really need to be a part of this, was the network that Ryan had built with his brand would open like many, many other doors for us and other business opportunities. So that's something that I look at also, which is actually something you should probably touch on. Like when you're building your brand and looking for these investors, I noticed that you weren't just taking chunks of cash. It was more like, I know you don't have as much cash as this guy, but your network is much larger and it's going to benefit our brand as a whole. So how do you navigate through that sort of stuff?
I see what you did there. To be honest with you, at the beginning, when we first started Fuse in 2000, we started ideating late 2018 and building 2019. And then we launched January 1st, 2020 for the first time. And then, of course, COVID hit and we relaunched September of 2021. We always had goals of tying ourselves to strategic investors, ones who can help us scale the business through their own distribution, right? Like I think that's the term strategic capital. We didn't really know how we were going to do it at first. I didn't pretend to know either. Early on, the first time we ever raised capital in 2019, it was an angel round. We said, let's just take any money from anyone who will support us and believes in our vision, because that will help us get this product, off the ground and validated. And after that, and when we raised our second, third, and fourth rounds of financing, we were always intentional with understanding that if we can, if we can cultivate a strategic moat, part of our competitive advantage, as being substantiated by the people who have invested in us, that we also get to work with commercially, Live Nation, ASM Global, some of the biggest venue and live event companies in the world. We knew that, well, now we have guaranteed distribution to help us commercially scale our business, and we can do it with companies that also have a vested interest in the upside and success of our company. And so all the time, every time that we ever raised strategic capital from investors who helped support the growth of our business, 6 months before we knew we were going to do it, we started finding a way to backdoor a commercial relationship with these huge companies, working with one of their venues or maybe with a region of their facilities. And then after 3, 4, 5 months, when we knew we were going to raise capital, we went to the investment teams at these businesses and we said, hey, here's who we are, here's what we're doing, here's why you should invest in us. And by the way, our product is already validated by your company because you're a client of ours and we work with you. And that was kind of the strategy we took. And it ended up, once you get one, it makes the second and third a bit easier because there's a bit of a FOMO effect. I'm sure you guys have seen that in working with brands. But that's a great question. Maybe you should be the moderator. I have a question for you, Nick. Be honest.
Yep.
How much of the investing that you guys do as business partners in startups like Fuse and many others do you rely on Dan for? I know he's the first line of defense. Any opportunity that gets in front of you has probably gone through an extensive sniff test with Dan. In fact, I can attest to the fact that it has, because I was one of those people on the other end of the table. But how often are you also shutting down something that he may be bullish on and saying, I don't really have an interest in this, and how much of it is you relying on him?
I mean, well, me and me and Horse have known each other now for almost 15 years. We went to school together. He's not being completely honest. He used to bully me at school. And then now he's my agent. So, but yeah.
And that's how you get him.
So I am always a bit scared of him.
It's a little bit of the Stockholm syndrome, you know?
But no, look, my life, tennis obviously is first priority. Like I'm trying to figure out still, I think, how to beat the best players in the world. Like that's my sole goal, is to still, how am I training? What am I trying to improve on the court? Trying to stay healthy. So I have to have utmost trust in Horse, and my other agent, Stu, he's not here at the moment, Stuart. They do all the hard yards and the hard work. They come to me and, oh, look, there's an opportunity here. And I kind of have a conversation. We get on a call, and I kind of want to know what it is. And obviously, if I like the brand, I see athletes all the time working with brands that they don't even like. And then you see the commercial and stuff, and you can see straight through it.
But I think that shows, exactly.
Exactly.
People can pick that up.
Yeah. So I've always okay, what's the brand? I want to be authentic. I'm not going to go meet them and do this for them for 5 hours and continually have all these communications if I don't like them at all. So they know that. They won't even come to me with anything that they think that I'm going to just dismiss. So pretty much everything. They do everything, to be brutally honest.
the opportunity wouldn't be there, I guess, without you as the brand behind it. So it's mutually beneficial and, you know, accretive to the growth of your shared portfolio. I have a question on here that I'm going to skip because I think everyone knows the answer. It's how intentional are you with cultivating your image? There is no intention there. I think everybody knows your image is who you are. What you see is what you get, and we addressed that earlier on. And it's, you know, people gravitate towards that. In fact, I have a confession to make. I haven't told you this.
You're in love.
About 5 years ago, well before you and I met, and I even thought there was ever a possibility of us meeting, I used to watch you, and this was before you went from full villain archetype, you were still in your villain era, into being like the villain that everybody loves. And I was like, God, I can't stand this guy, excuse me. I was like, he's so annoying. And very quickly, I started following you. And it's like, I couldn't help myself. I'm like, man, I love this guy. He's so authentic. Within 30 days of watching you through one of your tournaments. And I think that speaks to the authenticity, right? I picked it up very quickly, and I was like, oh man, I actually love the fire this guy brings to the game. And he does something that I can't remember the last tennis player who's brought this excitement and flair to what otherwise could be considered to be, you know, maybe a white tie, white collar sport where, you know, it can be a bit vanilla, right?
Well, I think it's good that it's also good if I got on your nerves. Like, there's not many tennis players right now or people that really get on people's nerves, and I think that's a good thing as well because it gets your attention either way.
Strategic. Maddie, hello.
Hi.
I think something I actually have never asked you, but I've always wondered, so it's a perfect time to ask you now in front of 1,000 people, is, you know, I would imagine that when you first started your business, a lot of people would have this, you know, maybe preconceived notion that, you know, or a misconception that because you have a platform in place, no matter what you do, it's a cheat code. It's going to be successful, right? And I use the word misconception because I don't think that's true. I've seen the hard work that you've put in, and no matter what anybody does, everything is difficult, always. I think everybody knows that. Like, nothing comes easy. And so what are some of the misconceptions that people have in having a large platform and a large social media presence, and how that may have positively impacted your business? That, you know, if you could shed light on that, I'd love to learn more.
Yeah, I think consumers today are a lot more switched on, and they're not as easily convinced as they used to be. I think 5 or 10 years ago, the strategy of influencers starting their own brand used to be a lot more impactful, but unless you're like a Steph Smith or like a Anna Paul with a cult following, I just don't think it's as impactful as it used to be. And, you know, I love my followers, I adore them, I'm forever grateful for them giving me a platform, but unfortunately, for me, about 70% of my followers are not my target sales demographic, if you know what I mean, and if you don't, I mean men. So I knew that going in. I knew I wasn't going to solely be able to rely on my followers for sales and the success of my business. And I utilized my social media in many other ways. And I think influencers definitely do have a big advantage when starting their own business, because we've done it before. We've literally built our own personal brand from 0 followers. And we know all the tips and the tricks and the techniques that it takes to build a brand. And so I've obviously used all of that to build Capri, and it was really exciting, honestly. I took it as a challenge to build Capri from 0 followers. And I remember when I first launched Capri, I was going through the following list, and I was still getting men following Capri. And I was literally going in and unfollowing, or
and
like making
it's
them.
only just for everybody. It's as of now, it's only just a women's clothing company, right?
Yes,
and so
yes. No,
you don't
this
have any
is
men's
very
product.
early. This is like 2.5 years ago. But I also used my influencer connections. Like, I have influencer friends that I'm really close to, that when I first launched, I sent out a bunch of clothing and bikinis and everything to them with no pressure or expectations for them to post. I just wanted to see them wearing it, and luckily a lot of them organically shared it, which was really heartwarming, and that was a huge help for Capri in the very beginning, and a huge marketing tool, especially because it was free. We love free. free marketing. And so, yeah, I think influencers definitely do have an advantage when building a brand, but
But that
nothing
doesn't make it easy.
No, I was about to say nothing that we haven't worked for or worked hard to get. There's still a lot of grind that goes into it, for sure.
And maybe Dan can also shed some light here. Would you say for Capri specifically, having moved to Los Angeles 5 years ago and now obviously spending time in markets all around the world, a lot of time in Australia, a lot of time in LA, but even traveling, would you say that what spawned out of as an Australian born and bred, European inspired brand has led to more growth outside of Australia than you thought? Or do you think that this is an Australian brand focused for Australian consumers that really has, potential to take over Australia, or do you see this being an international brand?
Well, when I first launched, I'm so proud to be Australian. I was so proud for it to be an Australian brand. You know how much I love Australia? I talk about it all the time. And so when I first launched Capri, I was really trying to focus and target the Australian consumer, and I wasn't marketing to anywhere else in the world. And after 6 to 8 months, and it was doing well, but after 6 to 8 months, I started marketing in the US, and the sales overnight were just ridiculous. It was night and day, obviously, because the US is so much bigger than Australia. So once we tapped into the US market, and then we tapped into the UK and Europe and all of that, I realized how I can utilize, both places, because like you said, I do spend so much time in LA. So I kind of have a very unique situation. I have an insider scoop almost, because I'm seeing the summer trends happen before they come to Australia. So I try and take the little things that I see, like what fabrics people are using, what styles, what colors, and I bring that always into the next collection for Australia and vice versa. So I've essentially just started a brand that has a never-ending summer collections all year round, which is my dream, because I try and avoid winter at all cost.
Well, I think that's a really unique take on how building a brand and catering to a global audience has benefited you.
Yeah.
Dan, you and Nick travel so much. I reckon over half the year. Out of curiosity, other than of course Australia, where do you guys like to travel the most? Where have you seen the most opportunity professionally find you guys? Again, I say other than Australia because Nick's one of the biggest personalities and sports figures in the country, and so I would imagine it's top here. Is next the US? Is it Europe? Is it the UK? Is it the Middle East? Where are you guys finding a lot of those opportunities right now? And what are you leaning into?
It's an interesting question, actually. So I'm lucky enough to obviously travel on the tennis tour and see the landscape of business across the world, and it's changing. The dynamic changes, and it's changed so much since COVID is obviously finished, and then we've tried to go back to what normal is, which I don't know if anyone can say what normal is these days, but I don't know. I think in America, obviously there's a lot of money there. It's the biggest sporting nation, I would say, that Western people can be a part of. But we're starting to see a bigger transition now, and a lot more athletes, especially, and sporting teams are getting involved in China, for example. And obviously you see the Middle East making a massive push to bring more sporting events there. And, because of all the oil money that they cultivate there, they have a lot more money to spend on getting the athletes there to entice them to come. Because I think tennis, for example, there's a 3-week break at the end of the year, and that's their off-season. And then they go back to playing the tour straight away. So if you ask an athlete like Nick, do you want to go to the Middle East? He'll be like, no. Well, do you want to go to the Middle East for 6 figures? It's still pretty far. Okay, so what's the number? And the Middle East have that kind of number. So you see a lot of athletes now traveling to the Middle East towards the end of the year, especially tennis players, and playing these exhibitions for quite a big check, actually. And I think Formula One's now in the Middle East, but a lot more things are coming back into the Chinese marketplace as well. I think we're about to launch Nick's brand and socials and all that sort of stuff into, I'm not sure the names, to be fair, because there's 7 or 8, but So that'll be interesting. I think there's a lot of brands there that have much bigger capital than what we see here in the Western world. So, like in China, there's some brands that are bigger than Nike, but we don't know about them.
Right.
So I think when you start to expose yourself to those types of brands, you're really just opening you're just opening like doors that you thought were, I guess never within reach, if that makes sense. But if I was to say right now the biggest landscape for us, it'd probably have to be the US. Only for the reason that they actually celebrate Nick over there. Like I think here in Australia we have a bit of tall poppy syndrome going on with a lot of our athletes. And it's just the culture that we have. When they get a little bit too big, they're like, oh, like he's an arsehole, yada, 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 like tear him down. And obviously if he's winning or if any athlete's winning, they love them. But as soon as they lose, they're a spoiled brat, like all sorts of things. And I think it's different in America because they really live through personalities. I think that is honestly the biggest difference, just the living through an athlete's personality. So like just the die-hard fan. Like I remember we went to America just quite recently. And this has really opened my eyes to just how big Nick was over there now. But we were walking on the sidewalk and some dude was driving like in the opposite direction, saw Nick, did the most dangerous U-turn you'd ever seen, wound down his window and screamed at Nick, like, oh, Nick, I love you. And then just kept driving. And I was like, dude, what
risked
just happened?
risked his life to praise Nick.
Yeah, but what just happened? So it is quite interesting. I don't know, I don't spend too much time in Europe, so I can't give my thoughts on that, but I think the US is the second biggest marketplace for us, for sure.
Happy to hear it. We've got about 15 minutes left, a little less. We're going to open up the floor in a few minutes to questions from the audience. Would love to hear what you guys, have to ask for anyone. Doesn't have to just be for Nick. It can be for any four of us. If you guys want to scan this QR code, you can submit your questions there, and in a few minutes, we'll start taking some of the most upvoted questions. Speaking of brands, I have another question for you, Maddie. You've worked with major brands, Tommy Hilfiger, Guess, Bali Body, Billabong. Now you've been on both sides and continue to be on both sides of the camera, if you will. Just very briefly, which one do you prefer?
Ooh, that's a good question. I honestly love both, but nothing beats a new collection shoot day for me. I love, finding a place to shoot, the vibe, the aesthetic, the styling. I just love being behind the creative side of things. Like a Capri shoot feels like 5 minutes within 8 hours. But if I'm shooting for someone else's brand, like 8 hours feels like 8 hours. You know what I mean? I'm like a little pocket rocket on Capri shoot days. I love it. But I still love both.
And last question for Nick before we kind of open up. Many people here probably want to know. I definitely want to know. I've asked you, I haven't gotten straight answers. We recently got a very exciting glimpse into seeing a return to having you back on the court, where you defeated in your first semi-competitive match in an exhibition, world number 8 player right before the US Open about 2 months ago in New York, Casper Ruud. You looked great. I know your wrist was a little sore the next day, so you pulled out of that exhibition tournament. While we know the journey to recovery has been one you've been intentionally methodical with because you don't want to rush it back, and you were only given a 10% chance at recovering, so kudos to you for getting back to the point that you're at. The world wants to know, South by Southwest wants to know, Sydney wants to know, Australia wants to know. When can we expect to officially see you back on competitive tour and bring home that next Grand Slam?
The injury I had was brutal. I had a wrist reconstruction. I don't know if anyone knows, but yeah, it was. The surgeon basically said, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to play again, and I was like, whatever, just try and get me 1 or 2 more years out of my career. So everything's gone, I guess, semi-well. I will be playing the Australian Open, obviously, which I'm super excited for, the Australian Summer, and just to be a part of it again will be sick. Yeah.
I don't think you've formally announced that yet. I think you've teased it, but that's the first time you've come out and said that, your eyes are on the prize for the Aussie Open, your home tournament, your home country, first Grand Slam of the year.
Yeah, it's been a brutal couple years. Obviously, haven't played the Australian Open in a couple of years due to injury. But I just miss being out there, miss being playing in front of the home crowd, and we've got such a good group of guys at the moment. Obviously, playing, Alex de Minaur, all these guys are playing amazing tennis, but just want to be out there, lighting up the crowd and playing in front of my home country, I guess, and just whether it's good or bad, it'll definitely be a lot of fun, that's for sure. But I'm looking forward to it.
We are too. I'm looking at some of the questions that are coming in, and there are a lot, so I'll try to get to them. A lot of them are highly upvoted. One of them saying that all of Australia is backing you to take home the Aussie Open. How we can expect to see you in a few months' time. I'm very excited. I'm sure you are, and everyone in your corner is. It's got to be an interesting feeling to have a nation behind you, right? Like even the top American players, because maybe the country's so big, still lose out to, some of the other international players as being, the favorites, right? Whereas here, if you're playing, 99 out of 100 times, Aussies are rooting for you, even if you're playing against their quote-unquote most favorite player. How do you deal with that pressure?
I knew this was going to happen. I knew I was going to come back from an injury like this, and no matter if I'm playing the Oz Open or not, they're like, okay, if you win the Grand Slam, that's the only thing that matters. But for me, it would be unfair to myself, like just the fact that I'm back on court and playing at this level is a success in itself, and I knew that if I entered the Australian Open, the Australian media is going to be like, okay, Grand Slam or nothing. But look, I'm excited for it, and the Wimbledon final was the first time in 19 years we had someone, an Australian, in the final of a Grand Slam. So that's my only motivation to come back and play is to try and win a Grand Slam, and after that I'll be done. But I'll give it one more shot. But I appreciate it. I appreciate all the support. It goes a long way.
Well, we're all rooting for you, everybody here and beyond. This one's for Maddie and Nick, and it has to do with the fact that you guys both have, a global, celebrity brand, and for different reasons, of course, in different industries, but you have a large audience and large platforms. How do you guys navigate, I guess, differences in business interest around the world? How do you walk the line of what may be, strong business acumen in Australia maybe is taboo in Asia, or is, not the normal rung of business in America? Or do you just show up as yourself, being fundamentally true to who you are again, and understand that I don't need to put pressure on myself because I'm here, selected to be here for me and who I am?
I'm going to be 100% honest. I don't really feel any pressure.
Good. I love that.
I'm just me, and I do me, and I work hard, and I just don't. I've never really felt that kind of pressure, if I'm being completely honest. Nick might be different though.
You don't change, mate.
Yeah, for me it's strange because I've literally been in front of hundreds of thousands of people just getting booed, completely booed. I was playing Nadal in Mexico once, and not one person in the entire stadium was going for me. So I actually like being the underdog. I like showing up to places when people really don't like me and spoiling their day.
We know.
And I do also love playing in front of Melbourne Rod Laver Arena with every single person in that arena wanting the Aussie to go and win it all. So I've been thrown into the deep end many times, and I love it. I've had. I was in Belgium one time, and Leighton Hewitt was in my face, pointing at me like, "You need to like f-bombs." I've seen it all, so I'm good.
And it shows. It's we've got to commend you for the public scrutiny that you used to take. I think now it's a lot of public admiration, and that has transformed into maybe pressure. But regardless, it's pressure nonetheless. Couldn't imagine doing it myself. Kudos to you. A couple questions on here that I actually didn't get to, but I also had written. Were one, just quickly, who's your GOAT? And two, what do you want your legacy to be? We know you're not done yet. We know that. You've got a lot of gas in the tank. But what do you want, thinking 20 years down the line? What do you want your legacy to be?
Yeah, we touched on it earlier. I think for me, I just want to continue to help, with the future generation. Kids. I used to be an overweight kid growing up, and I used to feel super insecure about playing sport, and I wasn't confident. So I think how I want to be remembered is for what I've done off the court more so than on the court. I think on the court, my legacy is going to be, it's going to be a question mark. I don't want my son or my daughter one day to go on YouTube and type in, Nick Kyrgios bad moments or anything like that. I don't know if I can erase those, but I've had a lot of good moments.
Laugh if you haven't done it.
Good moments too, but
Yeah.
I think my tennis is question marks, but how I went about things off the court, with helping the future of kids coming up that want to play sport or a bit insecure and that type of stuff, I really see myself falling into that space more and more. But just being just a good, honest dude, being authentic, and always just being real to people. And I think that's kind of the way my life's going anyway.
Well, it's a really exciting time for you and for fans of yours. I think we're right on the precipice of your comeback tour, which is going to be amazing to see. Already know there's a ton of, media behind it. So we'll be following from close and afar. Couple minutes here. Want to maximize every second we can. Horse, assuming you were in sports and Nick aside and tennis aside, if you could be a manager in any sport, and I know the answer to this, but I think that, the audience wants to know, what sport would you like to most be involved in?
Basketball.
Another thing you and Nick have in common. Nick's favorite sport actually is not tennis, for those who didn't know. It's basketball, is that right?
Yeah, correct. I hated tennis growing up, absolutely despised it.
It's just work for him, really.
Basketball was my first passion. I had a basketball hoop. My parents completely pushed me into tennis. They were like, what's easier to make from Australia? Back in the day, we didn't have many routes to go to the NBA or play basketball. So they were like, we're done with this sport. Stop playing. We're going to play tennis. And I was like crying. I was throwing tantrums. Obviously, they carried on to this day.
They knew what they were doing. Parents always know best, clearly.
Yeah, and look, I'm super grateful. I listened to them, but I hated tennis growing up. And it was miserable playing. And now I love it.
Well, thank you for pursuing it and sticking to it. We're all lucky to see you and watch you play. Maybe one of the last questions here is, you two are both from Canberra, Horace and Nick. Humble beginnings.
Why's that? It's the capital. What do you mean humble beginning? what do you mean?
The best city in the world.
Could have been from Sydney. Could have been from Sydney and come from humble beginnings. So the two things are not mutually exclusive. But humble beginnings, coincidentally, from Canberra. It's better. You guys are on a global stage, global audience now. The question says, what do you miss about Canberra? But you guys are still very much entrenched in Canberra culture. You're rooted there. You spend the majority of your time there. Nick, I know you're between Sydney and Canberra. What's the biggest difference in, sort of graduating from Canberra and now, spending time on global stages in some of the biggest cities around the world in different countries?
I miss the roundabouts. No, I'm kidding. I think just the biggest thing that I think that I learned very quickly was just how isolated Australia was. And it really is one of the greatest countries in the world. And Canberra is the best city in the world. And there's a few reasons, and if you haven't been there, I'll welcome you and I'll take you for a coffee. But it's just, I think it's more home that you miss, and I think Nick can speak more on this than I can because he's been doing it for longer than I have, but the scrutiny and just the exhaustion you have to face traveling and showing up and doing what you have to do every single day at a level that he's doing at is a lot harder than what I have to do. Like, I just have to wake up and use my brain. But yeah, it's brutal. So I think just coming back into our borders and then being able to be at home, whether it's Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Canberra, I think that's just the part that you miss. Just you feel like there's a weight off your shoulders, and you're safe again, if that makes sense.
No one cares about me there too. They're like, I grew up. No
Yeah, it's
they just flick me off.
the neighborhood,
Yeah,
just the neighborhood bloke,
Yeah.
right? Maddie, what female entrepreneur, if any, have inspired you? Doesn't have to be Australian, can be, and really inspired you because of what she has created with her brand. Is there someone that comes to mind as kind of the North Star inspiration for you?
Yeah, the first person that comes to mind is, I don't know if you guys have heard of her, Matilda Djerf. Have you guys heard of her? She's started as a Swedish influencer, and she's launched a clothing brand, and it's a lot more like basics, kind of chic corporate vibe, but she's just created an absolute empire, and she's gone worldwide, and I just think her personality and her the way she holds herself and her work ethic is just amazing, and she's definitely someone that I look up to and inspire to be like.
Amazing. Well, I look up to all of you guys. Thank you for your time. Thank you guys all for being here. I think we're just unfortunately, we're at time now. You know, I'm sure everybody here, for anybody who's wondering, knows where to find these people. A very quick Google search and you'll find the socials for all three of them. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you guys for coming, and we look forward to next time.
Thank you.